So this is what human males use to breed. The shocked exclamation echoed through the sterile laboratory as Brian Bennett materialized out of thin air, his bare form a stark contrast to the clinical surroundings. Disoriented and exposed, Brian's eyes darted around the unfamiliar room. Sleek, otherworldly equipment lined the walls, emitting soft blue glows. His gaze settled on the source of the outcry, a blue-skinned, humanoid creature with writhing tendrils framing its face. The alien's eyes, wide with fascination, were fixed squarely on Brian's nether regions. Brian's cheeks flushed as he frantically covered himself with his hands. This isn't what it looks like, he stammered, his mind racing to piece together what had happened. The experimental teleportation device, the routine maintenance check, the accidental activation. It all came flooding back in a rush of panic. The blue-skinned alien, Dana, took a tentative step forward. Her tendrils twitched with curiosity as she observed the first human she'd ever encountered. Fascinating, she murmured, her translator converting her aquatic language to something Brian could understand. Your reproductive anatomy is so external. Before Brian could formulate a response, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red lights pulsed, bathing the laboratory in an eerie glow. Dana's expression shifted from wonder to concern. "Oh no," she whispered, "the intruder alert." The laboratory door hissed open, revealing an imposing figure flanked by armed guards. Captain Zorn, the Benzite ship's commanding officer, surveyed the scene with a mixture of shock and suspicion. His gaze hardened as it fell on Brian. "Detain the intruder," he ordered, his voice cold and authoritative. Brian raised his hands in surrender, acutely aware of his vulnerability. "Wait, I can explain," he pleaded as the guards approached. But his protest fell on deaf ears as they roughly seized him, dragging him towards the exit. Dana interceded, her tendrils flaring with excitement. "Captain, wait! This could be an unprecedented opportunity. Look at the residual energy readings from his arrival. It's technology we've never seen before." Captain Zorn paused, his interest piqued. After a moment of consideration, he nodded curtly. "Take him to a holding cell. We'll question him there. And Dana, analyze those readings. If this technology is as valuable as you suggest, we need to keep this quiet. No word to high command until we know more." As Brian was led away, his mind raced with the implications of his predicament. He was trapped on an alien ship, separated from his crew aboard the Horizon, with no way to contact Earth. The experimental teleportation device that brought him here could revolutionize space travel, or spell disaster if it fell into the wrong hands. In the holding cell, Brian paced nervously, now clad in a strange form-fitting suit provided by his captors. He knew he had to tread carefully. Every word, every action could have far-reaching consequences for humanity's future in the cosmos. Meanwhile, Dana hunched over her instruments, poring over the data from Brian's arrival. Her tendrils quivered with excitement as she uncovered layer after layer of technological marvels. But beneath her scientific curiosity, a more personal interest began to take root. The human's unique physiology, so different from her own aquatic species, intrigued her on a level she couldn't quite explain. As the Benzite ship altered course for a remote outpost, a complex dance began to unfold. Brian, struggling to find a way home while protecting Earth's secrets. Dana, driven by scientific discovery and a growing fascination with human biology. And looming over it all, the specter of a technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. In this alien environment, Brian Bennett found himself not just fighting for his own survival, but potentially for the future of humanity itself. And all because of one accidental activation that left him exposed in more ways than one. Brian's confinement aboard the Benzite ship stretched from hours into days. The stark holding cell offered little comfort, its alien design a constant reminder of his predicament. He found himself longing for the familiar surroundings of the Horizon, his crewmates, even the mundane routines of ship maintenance. His isolation was broken only by the arrival of Dana, the blue-skinned alien whose initial fascination with his anatomy had evolved into something more complex. She entered his cell, her tendrils undulating with what Brian had come to recognize as excitement. "I've received permission for further examinations," Dana announced, her translator conveying a mix of professional detachment and underlying enthusiasm. "We'll be moving you to a specialized research area." Brian nodded, a knot forming in his stomach. He knew cooperation was his best strategy, but the thought of more intimate scrutiny made him uneasy. As the guards escorted him through the ship's corridors, he took mental notes of the layout, searching for potential escape routes or weaknesses in their security. The makeshift laboratory Dana had set up was a stark contrast to his holding cell. Advanced medical equipment lined the walls, their purpose a mystery to Brian. He was directed to a central examination table, the surface molding to his body as he lay down. Dana approached, her tendrils twitching as she activated a series of scanning devices. "These are non-invasive," she assured him, noticing his apprehension. "We're particularly interested in your reproductive system. It's so different from ours." As the scans progressed, Brian felt exposed in a way that went beyond physical nakedness. Each probe and sensor seemed to peel away layers of his humanity, reducing him to a specimen for alien study. He closed his eyes, trying to focus on gathering information rather than his discomfort. "Your body's responses are fascinating," Dana murmured, her tendrils brushing against his skin as she adjusted the equipment. The touch sent an involuntary shiver through Brian, a reaction that didn't go unnoticed by the alien scientist. "Interesting," she noted, her attention shifting. "Your sensory responses are quite acute. Does physical contact always elicit such a reaction?" Brian swallowed hard, acutely aware of the complex interplay of emotions and physical sensations coursing through him. "It depends on the context," he managed to reply, his voice strained. Dana's examination continued, her touch alternating between clinical precision and something that felt almost like curiosity. Brian found himself responding in ways he hadn't anticipated, his body betraying a mix of stress, fear, and an unwelcome attraction to the alien scientist. As the days passed, Brian's time became divided between the sterile confines of Dana's laboratory and the isolation of his holding cell. He began to look forward to the examinations, not for the procedures themselves, but for the chance to interact with Dana. Their conversations gradually shifted from purely scientific inquiries to more personal exchanges. "Tell me about your home," Dana asked one day as she calibrated her instruments. "What is Earth like?" Brian hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. He decided on a carefully curated version of the truth. "Earth is diverse, with oceans and mountains, deserts and forests. Our cities are filled with millions of people, all living and working together." Dana's tendrils rippled with interest. "It sounds beautiful, so different from our underwater colonies." As Brian shared more about human culture and history, he subtly probed for information about the benzites and their technology. He learned of their aquatic origins, their recent expansion into space, and hints of the political structures that governed their society. Meanwhile, unknown to Brian, the ship's engineer Crix had begun his own secret project. In a secluded section of the engineering bay, he pored over the energy readings from Brian's arrival, his mind racing with the possibilities of reverse engineering the teleportation technology. Captain Zorn visited Crix's workspace, his expression stern. "Progress?" he demanded. Crix gestured to a complex series of equations displayed on a holographic screen. "The principles are unlike anything we've encountered, Captain, but I believe with more time and data, we can adapt it for benzite physiology." Zorn nodded, a rare smile crossing his features. "Excellent. This could change everything for our people. Keep it confidential and coordinate with Dana. Her research on the human's biology may be crucial." As the benzite ship continued its journey to a remote outpost, the atmosphere on board grew increasingly tense. Dana found herself spending more time with Brian outside of their formal research sessions, drawn to his alien yet strangely compelling presence. One evening, as they sat in a quiet corner of the laboratory, Dana's tendrils reached out, gently brushing against Brian's arm. "I've never encountered a species like yours," she said softly. "You're so different, yet there's something about you that I find—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words. Brian felt a surge of conflicting emotions, hope for a potential ally, fear of the consequences of getting too close, and an undeniable attraction to this alien being who had become his sole connection in this strange world. The moment was shattered by the harsh buzz of the ship's intercom. Captain Zorn's voice filled the room, cold and authoritative. "Dana, report to the bridge immediately. We have a situation." As Dana hurried away, leaving Brian alone in the lab, neither of them realized that far away, aboard the horizon, Captain Sarah Chen was closing in on their location. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of Brian's ingenuity, Dana's loyalty, and the future of human-benzite relations. As Dana hurried away to the bridge, leaving Brian alone in the lab, an uneasy silence settled over the room. The tension that had been building between them lingered in the air, a palpable force that both excited and terrified him. Brian's solitude was short-lived. Within minutes, Dana returned, her tendrils writhing with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "We need to continue our examination immediately," she said, her voice tight with an emotion Brian couldn't quite place. As Brian positioned himself on the examination table, he noticed Dana's movements were more hurried, less precise than usual. She activated a series of new scanning devices, their soft hum filling the room. "These scans are more comprehensive than our previous ones," Dana explained, her tendrils twitching nervously. "We need to explore your physiological responses in greater detail." As the examination progressed, Brian felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body. Dana's tendrils brushed against his skin, adjusting sensors and probes with an urgency that seemed at odds with her usual methodical approach. Suddenly, a wave of intense sensation washed over Brian. His body arched involuntarily, every nerve ending seemingly on fire. A gasp escaped his lips as he struggled to understand what was happening. Dana's eyes widened in shock. "This wasn't supposed to... I didn't anticipate," she stammered, her tendrils flaring wildly. In that moment of chaos, Brian's instincts took over. He noticed a nearby computer terminal, its screen glowing invitingly. With Dana distracted by the unexpected turn of events, he lunged for the terminal, his fingers flying across the alien interface. Years of training kicked in as Brian navigated the benzite systems. He downloaded schematics, crew logs, and most crucially, information about their plans for the teleportation technology. His heart raced as the data flowed, knowing each second increased the risk of detection. As the final pieces of information transferred, a soft beep emanated from the terminal. Brian's blood ran cold as he realized his actions had triggered a silent alarm. "Brian, what have you done?" Dana's voice was a mix of betrayal and fear. Before he could respond, the ship lurched violently, throwing them both off balance. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, their harsh tones a stark contrast to the previous quiet of the lab. "Warning! Teleportation device malfunction! All personnel evacuate immediately!" An automated voice announced, its calm delivery at odds with the panic spreading through the ship. The laboratory door hissed open, revealing two guards with weapons drawn. "The human goes back to his cell," one barked, reaching for Brian. In the confusion of another violent tremor, Brian saw his chance. He ducked under the guard's grasp, using the momentum to propel himself into the corridor. Behind him, he heard Dana's voice, torn between duty and something else. "Wait! Don't hurt him!" Brian raced through the alien corridors, his mind racing to recall the ship's layout from the schematics he'd seen. The vessel shuddered around him, the experimental teleportation device wreaking havoc on its systems. As he rounded a corner, he collided with a benzite crew member who materialized out of thin air, victim of the malfunctioning device. The disoriented alien stumbled, giving Brian the opening he needed to continue his dash toward freedom. The shuttle bay doors loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the chaos. Brian's lungs burned as he pushed himself harder, knowing his one chance at escape lay just beyond. He burst into the shuttle bay, his eyes scanning frantically for a viable escape craft. The sleek benzite shuttles stood ready, their streamlined forms a stark contrast to the utilitarian human vessels he was used to. Brian rushed to the nearest shuttle, his hands searching for an access panel or control interface. His heart sank as he realized the cruel truth. The shuttles required benzite biosignatures to activate. "Brian, stop!" Dana's voice echoed through the bay. She stood in the doorway, her tendrils splayed in agitation. "You can't leave. Not like this." He turned to face her, acutely aware of the precious seconds ticking away. "Dana, I have to get back to my people. You know that." Her tendrils writhed in what Brian had come to recognize as internal conflict. "If you leave now, in one of our shuttles, you'll be hunted across the galaxy. Let me help you." Before Brian could respond, Captain Zorn's voice boomed over the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, abandon ship. Repeat, all hands, abandon ship." Dana moved swiftly to the shuttle, her tendrils interfacing with its control panel. The craft hummed to life, its systems responding to her benzite biosignature. "Get in," she said, her voice firm with dedication. "I'm coming with you." As Brian climbed aboard, the ship rocked violently. Through the shuttle's viewport, he saw a massive energy vortex forming in the center of the bay, the failed teleportation experiment reaching its catastrophic conclusion. Dana's tendrils danced across the shuttle's controls, initiating the launch sequence. The craft lifted off just as the energy vortex expanded, consuming everything in its path. They burst from the benzite ship's disintegrating hull, the small shuttle buffeted by waves of energy. Brian gripped his seat, his squeezing hard, as Dana expertly maneuvered them through the chaos. Behind them, the benzite ship imploded in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave hit their shuttle like a physical blow, sending them tumbling through space. As the light faded and the turbulence subsided, an eerie calm settled over the shuttle. Brian and Dana looked at each other, the weight of their situation sinking in. They were alone, adrift in unfamiliar space with no way to contact their respective peoples. Dana's tendrils moved slowly, almost hesitantly, as she checked the shuttle systems. "We have limited supplies," she said softly, "and I'm not sure of our exact location." Brian nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of their escape and the challenges that lay ahead. As he gazed out at the star-studded void, he couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was far from finished. Unknown to the unlikely pair, their escape had not gone unnoticed. In the distance, sensors on multiple ships pinged as they detected the energy signature of the benzite ship's destruction. The Horizon, Brian's home, altered course to investigate. A benzite patrol fleet, alerted to the loss of one of their vessels, converged on the coordinates. And beyond the scope of either human or benzite sensors, another force stirred. In the territory they now drifted into, an ancient and unknown alien species took note of the small shuttle and the strange energy readings that accompanied it. As Brian and Dana's shuttle floated deeper into this uncharted region, they remained unaware of the forces gathering around them, setting the stage for a conflict that would reshape the balance of power in this corner of the galaxy. As the shuttle drifted deeper into uncharted space, Brian and Dana's eyes widened at the sight before them. Looming ahead was a massive space station, its design unlike anything either of them had encountered before. Organic-looking structures intertwined with advanced technology, creating a breathtaking fusion of nature and engineering. The station's surface pulsed with soft bioluminescence, casting an ethereal glow against the backdrop of stars. "What is that?" Dana's tendrils twitched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Brian's hands moved over the shuttle's controls, adjusting their course. "I don't know, but it might be our only chance for help or refuge." As they approached the station, a gentle vibration rippled through the shuttle. Brian struggled with the controls, but to no avail. "We're caught in some kind of tractor beam," he announced, trying to keep the panic from his voice. The shuttle glided smoothly into a cavernous docking bay, coming to rest on a platform that seemed to breathe beneath them. As the airlock hissed open, Brian and Dana exchanged a nervous glance before stepping out into the alien environment. They were immediately greeted by a group of beings unlike any they had ever seen. The creatures were tall and slender, with multiple limbs that moved with fluid grace. Their bodies shimmered with patterns of bioluminescent light, creating a mesmerizing display. One of the beings stepped forward, its lights pulsing in what seemed to be a greeting pattern. "Welcome, travelers," it spoke, its voice a melodious hum. "I am Vexnar, chief diplomat of the Xyloxians. We are most intrigued by your arrival." Brian cleared his throat, acutely aware of how strange he and Dana must appear to these beings. "I'm Brian Chen, a human from Earth. This is Dana, a Benzite. We're seeking sanctuary." Vexnar's body flickered with what might have been curiosity. A human and a Benzite traveling together? Most unusual. "We would be honored to offer you refuge in exchange for information about your species and the events that brought you here." As Vexnar led them deeper into the station, Brian and Dana marveled at the diversity of life forms they encountered. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors, engaged in what appeared to be scientific pursuits. "Our station serves as a hub for various species to exchange knowledge and conduct joint research," Vexnar explained. "We Xyloxians are dedicated to scientific advancement and maintaining peace in our sector of space." Brian and Dana were shown to a comfortable living space, its walls alive with soft, pulsating lights. As they settled in, Vexnar's expression grew serious. "I must inform you that we have detected both human and Benzite ships entering our sector. They appear to be searching for you." Dana's tendrils coiled tightly. "What will you do?" "We offer to act as mediators," Vexnar replied. "We hope to prevent any potential conflict between your species. In the meantime, we would like to assign you to our xenobiology department. Your unique perspectives could be invaluable in our ongoing research." The next day, Brian and Dana found themselves in a vast laboratory, surrounded by specimens and data from countless alien species. Their task was to assist in cataloging and studying the reproductive systems of various life forms. As they worked, Brian couldn't help but steal glances at Dana. The intimate nature of their research forced them to confront the growing attraction between them. He found himself comparing human and Benzite physiologies, wondering about the possibilities. Their work caught the attention of Dr. Lirazine, a female Xyloxian scientist specializing in interspecies compatibility. Her body pulsed with excitement as she approached them. "Your pairing fascinates me," she hummed. "I propose a series of experiments to test human Benzite genetic compatibility. Would you be willing to participate?" Brian and Dana exchanged a look, a mix of uncertainty and curiosity passing between them. After a moment's hesitation, they agreed, seeing an opportunity to better understand their own biology and the potential for their relationship. As the days passed, Brian and Dana grew closer, their shared experiences on the station creating a unique bond. They found themselves drawn to each other, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Late one night, as they stood before a viewport watching distant stars, Dana's tendrils gently intertwined with Brian's fingers. "I never imagined I'd feel this way about an alien," Dana whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Brian smiled, squeezing her tendrils gently. "I guess we're both aliens now." Their moment of peace was shattered by an urgent announcement over the station's communication system. "Attention all personnel. Human and Benzite ships have entered Xyloxian space. All diplomats report to the central chamber immediately." As Brian and Dana rushed to the central chamber, they knew that the next few hours would determine not only their fate, but potentially the future of human-Benzite relations. The Xyloxian station, once a sanctuary, now stood at the center of a brewing interstellar conflict. Crisis. Brian and Dana entered the central chamber, their hearts racing with anticipation and fear. The room buzzed with tension as representatives from the human and Benzite delegations faced each other across a large circular table. Vexnar stood at the center, his bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly as he attempted to mediate the heated discussion. Captain Sarah Chen of the Horizon, her face set in a grim expression, locked eyes with Brian. "Mr. Chen, I demand an explanation for your actions. You've put Earth in a precarious position." Before Brian could respond, Admiral Krell's voice boomed through the chamber. "The human is inconsequential. We require the immediate return of Dana. Her actions constitute treason against the Benzite Confederation." Vexnar raised his appendages, calling for calm. "Please, let us approach this situation with diplomacy. Both Brian and Dana sought sanctuary here, and as neutral parties, we have an obligation to—" The diplomat's words were cut short as the chamber doors slid open, revealing a striking figure that immediately commanded attention. The newcomer stood taller than any being in the room, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer with every movement. Her hypnotic eyes scanned the assembly before settling on Brian and Dana. "I am Zarakesh, emissary of the Valorian Collective," she announced, her voice rich and melodious. "We have been observing the developments on this station with great interest." The human and Benzite delegates exchanged confused glances, clearly caught off guard by the Valorians' arrival. Captain Chen stepped forward, her voice imbued with suspicion. "And what exactly is the Valorian Collective's interest in this matter?" Zarakesh's lips curved into an enigmatic smile. "Our interest lies specifically with Brian and Dana. We request a private audience with them immediately." Admiral Krell's tendrils writhed in agitation. "Absolutely not. We will not allow—" "With all due respect," Vexnar interrupted, his tone firm, "Brian and Dana are under our protection. Any meeting must be of their own volition." All eyes turned to the couple. Brian felt Dana's tendrils brush against his hand, a gesture of solidarity. He nodded slowly. "We'll speak with the Valorian emissary." Ignoring the protest from both human and Benzite delegations, Zarakesh led Brian and Dana to a private chamber adjacent to the main hall. As the door closed behind them, the Valorian's demeanor shifted, becoming more relaxed and almost eager. "I apologize for the theatrics," Zarakesh began, "but the situation required a delicate touch. We've been monitoring your progress here, particularly Dr. Lyrazine's research into your genetic compatibility." Dana's tendrils coiled tightly. "You've been spying on us?" "Observing," Zarakesh corrected gently. "The Valorians have long sought evidence of successful interspecies breeding. We believe it holds the key to unlocking rapid evolutionary advancements and solving our own genetic stagnation." Brian's mind raced, trying to process the implications. "What exactly are you proposing?" The Valorian emissary's eyes gleamed with excitement. "We offer you protection from both human and Benzite authorities in exchange for your participation in a series of breeding experiments. These would take place at a secure Valorian research facility, far from the political tensions here." A heavy silence fell over the room as Brian and Dana absorbed the weight of Zarakesh's proposal. The couple exchanged a long look, years of unspoken feelings passing between them in an instant. "We need time to discuss this," Dana said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Zarakesh nodded graciously. "Of course, but I must warn you, the situation here is deteriorating rapidly. Your decision may need to come sooner rather than later." As if to punctuate her words, a distant explosion rocked the station. Alarms blared, and the chamber's comm system crackled to life with Vexnar's urgent voice. "Security breach in the xenobiology lab. All available personnel report immediately." Brian and Dana rushed back to the central chamber, finding it in chaos. Vexnar was coordinating with his security teams, while Captain Chen and Admiral Krell argued vehemently. "Your people are responsible for this attack," Chen accused, her face flushed with anger. Krell's tendrils lashed out in frustration. "Preposterous! We would gain nothing from such a crude assault." Vexnar turned to Brian and Dana, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with concern. "A group of Benzite extremists attempted to infiltrate Dr. Lyrazine's lab. They were after the compatibility research data." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Brian felt Dana's tendrils intertwine with his fingers. He looked into her eyes, seeing his own fears and desires reflected back at him. In that moment, their decision crystallized. "We need to leave," Brian said softly, squeezing Dana's tendrils gently. "It's the only way to defuse the situation." Dana nodded, her voice filled with a mix of trepidation and excitement. "We'll accept the Valorian's offer." They approached Vexnar, quickly explaining their decision. The Xyloxian diplomat listened with growing concern, his appendages twitching nervously. "I understand your reasoning, but I fear your departure may only escalate tensions further." Before they could respond, Zarakesh materialized beside them, her iridescent skin glowing with an otherworldly light. "The time for subtlety has passed. We must act now." With a graceful gesture, the Valorian emissary activated a device on her wrist. The station's lights flickered and died, plunging the central chamber into darkness. In the confusion that followed, Brian felt a strange tingling sensation envelop his body. When the lights returned moments later, he found himself standing in the sleek interior of a Valorian shuttle, Dana at his side and Zarakesh at the controls. Through the view screen, he watched as the Xyloxian station receded into the distance, human and Benzite ships scrambling in vain to intercept them. As the shuttle engaged its cloaking device and jumped to faster-than-light travel, Brian turned to Dana. Her tendrils were coiled tightly with anxiety, but her eyes shone with persistence and something more, a spark of hope for their shared future. "Are we ready for this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dana's tendrils gently caressed his face. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I do know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The shuttle streaked through the vast expanse of space, carrying Brian and Dana towards an uncertain future filled with scientific discovery, political intrigue, and the promise of a love that transcended the boundaries of species. As they left behind the familiar territory of human and Benzite space, they couldn't help but wonder what awaited them in the uncharted reaches of Valorian territory. Space. As they entered Valorian territory, the vastness of space gave way to a bustling sector filled with advanced technology and diverse alien species. The shuttle docked smoothly at the Valorian Research Facility, a massive structure that seemed to float effortlessly in the void. As the airlock cycled, Brian and Dana exchanged nervous glances, their future uncertain, but their willpower unwavering. Zarakesh led them through gleaming corridors, her iridescent skin reflecting the soft ambient light. "Welcome to your new home," she said, gesturing to a spacious suite. "We've adapted it to meet both your physiological needs." Brian marveled at the room's design. One side featured a familiar Earth-like environment, while the other mimicked Benzite atmospheric conditions. A shimmer in the air marked the barrier between the two zones. "This is incredible," Dana whispered, her tendrils unfurling in wonder. They had little time to acclimate before Dr. Xel Vorn, the lead Valorian researcher, ushered them to the medical bay. The alien scientist's multiple eyes blinked rapidly as he directed them to stand on circular platforms. "These scans are non-invasive," Dr. Zelvorn assured them, his voice a melodious hum. "We'll gather detailed information about your reproductive systems and genetic makeup." As the scan commenced, Brian felt a tingling sensation across his skin. He watched in fascination as holographic displays materialized, showcasing intricate details of his internal anatomy. Dana's scan revealed the complex network of her Benzite reproductive system. Dr. Selvorn's appendages danced over the controls, his excitement palpable. "Fascinating. There are surprising compatibilities between your species." The next few days were a whirlwind of tests and examinations. Brian and Dana provided genetic samples, underwent physical assessments, and answered countless questions about their biology. Though some procedures were uncomfortable, they found solace in each other's presence. During their free time, they explored the facility. In one observation area, they encountered a Graxleon and a Vorbis, two alien species whose physical differences made Brian and Dana's seem trivial by comparison. "You must be the human and Benzite everyone's talking about," the Graxleon gurgled, its gelatinous body rippling. "We're here for similar reasons." The Vorbis, a crystalline being, chimed in with a voice like tinkling glass. "It's reassuring to meet others in our situation. The galaxy is changing, and we're at the forefront." As days turned to weeks, the Valorian scientists began synthesizing compatible hormones and genetic materials. Dr. Zelvorn presented them with a series of treatments designed to enhance their reproductive compatibility. "These procedures will induce subtle physiological changes," he explained. "It's crucial we proceed cautiously." Brian felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness as he received the first treatment. A warm sensation spread through his body, and he noticed an immediate heightened awareness of Dana's presence. Dana experienced her own changes. Her skin took on a slightly different hue, and she found herself more attuned to human body language. "It's strange," she confided to Brian. "I feel closer to you somehow." Their growing intimacy led to more frequent private encounters. In the safety of their suite, they explored their changing bodies and deepening connection. One evening, as they gazed out at the stars, Dr. Zelvorn burst into their quarters, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. "We've done it! We've created a viable method for human benzoate embryos. Brian and Dana stared at each other, the weight of this revelation hanging between them. Zara Kesh, who had entered behind the doctor, stepped forward. We propose moving to the next phase, attempting conception. The couple requested time alone to process this monumental decision. As the door closed behind the Valorians, Dana's tendrils sought Brian's hand. "A child," she whispered. "Our child. Is this even possible?" Brian pulled her close. "I don't know, but whatever we decide, we're in this together." Unbeknownst to them, forces were converging on the Valorian facility. In a seedy spaceport light years away, Captain Sarah Chen met with Jack Harper, a rugged information broker with a reputation for finding the unfindable. "I've traced their route," Harper said, sliding a data chip across the table. "Your fugitives are at a secret Valorian research station. Getting in won't be easy." Simultaneously, on a benzoate warship, Admiral Krell briefed Major Zix and his commando team. "Your mission is to extract Dana and all research data. Failure is not an option." As Brian and Dana grappled with the possibility of parenthood, the galaxy around them teetered on the brink of conflict. The future of interspecies relations hung in the balance, with the couple at its very center. Their decision hung in the air, unspoken but palpable, as the facility around them hummed with tension. Suddenly, the ambient lighting shifted to a pulsing red, and klaxons blared through the corridors. Dr. Xelvorn burst into their quarters, his multiple eyes wide with alarm. "We've detected multiple incoming vessels," he announced, his melodious voice strained. "The facility's security has been compromised." Brian and Dana exchanged worried glances. "What's happening?" Brian asked, his hand instinctively finding Dana's tendrils. Before Dr. Xelvorn could respond, Zara Kesh entered, her iridescent skin flickering with agitation. "We're under attack from multiple fronts. Human operatives, benzoate commandos, and something else. We need to move you to a secure location immediately." As they hurried through the gleaming corridors, the facility shuddered. In the distance, they heard the muffled sound of an explosion. Dana's tendrils coiled tightly around Brian's arm. "This way," Zara Kesh directed, leading them towards a heavily fortified section of the facility. Suddenly, a figure emerged from a side passage, blocking their path. Brian recognized him instantly. Jack Harper, the rugged information broker he'd encountered on numerous occasions during his time in the diplomatic corps. "Brian," Harper called out, his voice calm despite the chaos. "I'm here to get you out. Captain Chen sent me. We need to move now." Before Brian could respond, alarms blared from an adjacent corridor. A squad of benzoate commandos, led by Major Zix, burst into view, their eyes locked onto Dana. "Dana of Benza," Major Zix announced, his voice amplified by his environment suit. "By order of Admiral Krell, we're here to extract you and all research data. Come with us immediately." Brian felt Dana tense beside him. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the weight of their choice pressed upon them. Then, almost in unison, they acted. "No," Brian said firmly to Harper, while Dana's tendrils lashed out in a gesture of refusal towards Major Zix. Chaos erupted. Harper drew a compact plasma pistol, while the benzoate commandos raised their weapons. Zara Kesh activated a personal shield, enveloping Brian and Dana in a shimmering bubble of energy. "This way!" Dr. Xelvorn shouted, indicating an emergency access hatch. As they dove through the hatch, Brian caught a glimpse of a third group entering the fray, a diverse team of aliens led by a striking figure with cybernetic enhancements. The rogue scientists, he realized. They raced through maintenance tunnels, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. Dana stumbled, unused to the rapid movement in the artificial gravity. Brian caught her, supporting her weight as they pressed on. "The lab," Dr. Xelvorn panted as they emerged into a sterile white room. "We need to complete the procedure now. It's our only chance." Zara Kesh sealed the lab's entrance, her hands dancing over a control panel. "I can't hold them off for long." Brian and Dana locked eyes, a silent communication passing between them. With a nod, they turned to Dr. Xelvorn. "Do it," Brian said. The Valorian scientist moved with practiced efficiency, preparing a series of injections. These compounds will finalize the compatibility process we've been working towards, he explained. But in this accelerated form, the risks are significant. Dana's tendrils intertwined with Brian's fingers. We understand, she said softly. As Dr. Zellvorn administered the injections, the lab's reinforced door began to glow red, the metal warping under an intense heat. Zarakesh's features tightened with concentration as she fought to maintain the facility's defenses. Brian winced as the compound entered his bloodstream, feeling a rush of heat spread through his body. Beside him, Dana's skin rippled, taking on a faint luminescence. It's working, Dr. Zellvorn announced, his eyes fixed on a holographic display of their vitals. Your genetic structures are aligning at an unprecedented rate. A thunderous boom shook the lab. The door's integrity failed, and a swirling vortex of competing factions poured in. Human operatives, Benzite commandos, and the rogue scientists led by Dr. Corazin clashed in a chaotic melee. Amidst the fray, Brian and Dana clung to each other. The world around them seemed to fade away as they focused solely on one another. Brian marveled at the new sensations coursing through him, and heightened awareness of Dana's presence, a deep connection that transcended the physical. Dana's tendrils caressed Brian's face, her eyes wide with wonder. I can feel you, she whispered, not just physically, but everything. As the battle raged around them, Dr. Zellvorn worked feverishly at a console. The procedure is nearly complete, he called out. But we need to stabilize the genetic bonding. You need to consummate the process. Brian and Dana barely registered the scientist's words. They were already lost in each other, their bodies moving together with an instinctive harmony. Human skin and benzite tendrils intertwined, their newly altered physiologies responding to one another in ways that defied conventional understanding. The lab dissolved into chaos. Jack Harper and Major Zix found themselves fighting side by side against the rogue scientists. Zarakesh's shields flickered and failed under the onslaught. Dr. Corazin, her cybernetic implants glowing with power, pushed through the mayhem, her eyes fixed on the embracing couple. The future of the galaxy, she breathed, reaching out towards them. But Brian and Dana were oblivious to it all. In that moment, they existed in a world of their own making, a union of human and benzite that represented something entirely new. As their bodies joined, a ripple of energy pulsed through the lab, momentarily stunning all present. Dr. Zellvorn's eyes widened as he stared at his instruments. Impossible, he muttered. The genetic synthesis, it's accelerating beyond anything we predicted. As the warring factions regained their senses and the battle resumed, Brian and Dana remained locked in their intimate embrace. The fate of their potential offspring, the future of human-benzite relations, and perhaps the course of galactic history itself, hung in the balance as their unprecedented union reached its climax amidst the storm of interstellar conflict. Conflict reached its climax amidst the storm of interstellar chaos. The energy pulse emanating from Brian and Dana's union subsided, leaving the combatants momentarily stunned. As awareness returned, Dr. Zellvorn's voice cut through the haze. The procedure must continue immediately, he urged, his multiple eyes darting between his instruments and the couple. We have a limited window to complete the accelerated conception. Zarakesh reactivated her personal shields, creating a protective bubble around Brian, Dana, and Dr. Zellvorn. The Valorian scientist worked with practiced efficiency, preparing a series of injections designed to maximize human benzite genetic compatibility. As Dr. Zellvorn administered the treatments, Brian winced at the burning sensation coursing through his veins. Dana's tendrils coiled tightly around his arm, her skin taking on a faint bioluminescent glow. I feel different, Dana whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Before Brian could respond, the lab's reinforced door gave way with a thunderous boom. Jack Harper and his team of human operatives poured into the room, exchanging fire with the Valorian security forces. Taking advantage of the chaos, Major Zix and his benzite commandos slipped in through a separate breach, their eyes locked on Dana. Dr. Corazin and her rogue scientists seized the opportunity to hack into the facility's databanks. Holographic displays flickered to life around them as they began downloading years of interspecies breeding research. The download is at 30%, one of Corazin's associates reported, fingers flying over a portable terminal. Amidst the firefight, Brian shielded Dana with his body as Dr. Xelvorn continued the procedure. Suddenly, the lab's lights flickered, and a surge of energy coursed through the equipment. "The security breaches are causing power fluctuations," Zara Kesh called out, her iridescent skin pulsing with alarm. "We can't maintain stable conditions for the conception process." Dr. Xelvorn's expression hardened. "We have no choice. Initiating emergency acceleration protocol." He input a rapid sequence of commands, and Brian and Dana gasped as a wave of intense sensations washed over them. Their bodies began to change at an accelerated rate, adjusting to the final stage of compatibility. As the couple experienced the rush of physiological alterations, a new voice cut through the chaos. Vex Nar, the Xyloxian diplomat, strode into the lab, flanked by his entourage. "This conflict must cease immediately," Vex Nar announced, his resonant voice drawing all eyes to him. "We are on the brink of a historic moment in galactic relations." The arrival of the Xyloxians created a momentary lull in the fighting. Dr. Xelvorn seized the opportunity to complete the final phase of the procedure. "It's done," he proclaimed, his eyes wide as he studied the readouts. "The conception was successful. We have a viable human benzoate hybrid embryo." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Brian and Dana looked at each other in wonder, their hands intertwined over Dana's abdomen. The moment of awe was short-lived as the facility shuddered violently. Alarm klaxons blared, and emergency lights bathed the lab in a pulsing red glow. "The facility's structural integrity is compromised," Zara Kesh announced, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to evacuate immediately." Dr. Xelvorn turned to Brian and Dana. "The embryo is in a delicate state. We must get you to a secure medical facility to ensure its viability." As if on cue, the lab's equipment began to spark and smoke. The factions that had been locked in combat moments before now faced a common threat. "This way," Zara Kesh called out, indicating an emergency exit. "We have a medical ship standing by." As they moved towards the exit, Jack Harper and Major Zix found themselves side by side, weapons raised against a group of Valorian security drones that had activated in response to the facility's imminent collapse. "Truce?" Harper asked, his voice gruff. Major Zix nodded curtly. "For now." The unlikely allies cleared a path through the malfunctioning drones, allowing Brian and Dana to pass. As they navigated the deteriorating corridors, Dana stumbled, overwhelmed by the rapid changes in her body. Brian scooped her into his arms, his enhanced strength a result of the genetic modifications. "I've got you," he assured her, pressing on through the chaos. They reached a hangar bay where Dr. Corazin and her team were already prepping a sleek, unmarked vessel for departure. "Your child represents the next step in galactic evolution," Dr. Corazin called out to Brian and Dana. "Come with us. We can protect you and study this miraculous pregnancy." Before they could respond, Jack Harper and Major Zix burst into the hangar, having anticipated the escape route. "Step away from them," Harper growled, his plasma pistol trained on Dr. Corazin. Major Zix's environment suit whirred as he raised his weapon. "Dana of Benza, you must return with us. It's not safe here." Brian set Dana down gently, positioning himself between her and the opposing factions. The air crackled with tension as fingers hovered over triggers. Suddenly, a deafening rumble shook the hangar. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls and ceiling, and the floor beneath them groaned ominously. "We're out of time," Zara Kesh shouted. "The facility is breaking apart." In that moment of crisis, Vex Nar stepped forward, his arms raised in a gesture of peace. "We must set aside our differences if we hope to survive. I propose we all board Dr. Corazin's vessel and escape together. The safety of Brian, Dana, and their child must take precedence over our individual agendas." A beat of tense silence followed, broken only by the sounds of the facility's impending destruction. Then, as one, the disparate groups lowered their weapons. "Agreed," Jack Harper said, holstering his pistol. Major Zix nodded, "For the greater good of all our species." As chunks of the ceiling began to rain down around them, the unlikely band of humans, Benzites, Valorians, Xyloxians, and rogue scientists rushed aboard Dr. Corazin's ship. Brian helped Dana into a secure medical pod as the others strapped themselves in. Dr. Corazin's fingers danced over the ship's controls. The engines roared to life, and the vessel lifted off just as the hangar floor gave way beneath them. They burst out of the disintegrating facility, the explosion of the Valorian research station illuminating their departure like a newborn star. As the ship accelerated away from the debris field, Brian gazed out a viewport at the vast expanse of space before them. Dana's tendrils sought his hand, and he gave them a gentle squeeze. "Where do we go from here?" Dana asked softly, her free hand resting protectively over her abdomen. Before Brian could answer, Vexnar approached, his expression solemn. "We set course for neutral space," the Xyloxian diplomat announced. "There, we must navigate not only the physical challenges that lie ahead, but also the complex political and ethical implications of what we've set in motion." Brian nodded, his eyes meeting those of each passenger on the ship, former enemies now united by circumstance and the promise of new life growing within Dana. As the stars streaked by outside, he realized that their journey, both literal and figurative, was only beginning. As the stars streaked by outside, Brian tightened his grip on Dana's tendrils, his mind racing with the implications of their journey. The uneasy alliance aboard Dr. Corazin's ship settled into a tense routine as they navigated through neutral space. All eyes remained fixed on Dana, whose body began to change at an alarming rate. Within days, her abdomen swelled visibly, the accelerated pregnancy progressing far faster than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Corazin wasted no time in converting a section of the ship into a makeshift medical bay. Her team worked tirelessly, setting up monitoring equipment and adapting it to Dana's unique physiology. Brian rarely left Dana's side, his protective instincts heightened by the constant hum of activity around them. "The fetus is developing at 5 times the normal rate of either human or benzoate gestation," Dr. Corazin announced, her cybernetic implants pulsing as she analyzed the data. "This is unprecedented." Brian watched as Dana's skin rippled, bioluminescent patterns dancing across her surface. "Is she in pain?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Dr. Zelvorn shook his head. "Not pain, precisely, but the strain on her body is immense. We need to monitor her constantly." As the pregnancy progressed, Vexnar took on the role of mediator among the ship's diverse occupants. The Xyloxian diplomat moved from group to group, his resonant voice a constant presence in the ship's corridors. "We must put aside our differences," Vexnar urged during one particularly heated exchange between Jack Harper and Major Zix. "The child Dana carries represents a future none of us could have imagined. Its safety, and hers, must be our primary concern." Grudgingly, the factions agreed to a tentative peace. Jack Harper's team took shifts in engineering, working to optimize the ship's systems for their uncertain journey. Major Zix and his benzoate commandos focused on security, their suspicion of the others never fully abating but held in check by the gravity of their situation. On the 10th day of their voyage, alarms blared throughout the ship. Brian rushed to the medical bay, finding Dana writhing on the examination table, her tendrils lashing out in distress. "What's happening?" he demanded, pushing past Dr. Corazin to reach Dana's side. Before anyone could answer, the ship lurched violently. Through the viewport, Brian saw swirling clouds of charged particles, an ion storm of immense proportions. "The storm is interfering with our propulsion systems," Jack Harper's voice crackled over the intercom, "and it's playing havoc with our shielding." Dr. Corazin's fingers flew over her instruments. "The electromagnetic interference is affecting the fetus," she reported, her usual cool demeanor cracking. "Its development is fluctuating wildly. We need to stabilize both Dana and the child, or we could lose them both." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Brian held Dana's hand as Dr. Corazin and her team worked tirelessly to counteract the storm's effects. In engineering, Jack Harper led efforts to keep the ship's critical systems online, his technical expertise proving invaluable. "We need to change course," Major Zix insisted, bursting onto the bridge. "I've analyzed the storm's patterns. There's a path through, but it will require precise navigation." Vexnar nodded, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chaotic swirl of the ion storm. "Do it." With Major Zix at the helm, The ship dove deeper into the maelstrom. The hull groaned under the strain, but the Benzites' tactical acumen guided them true. Slowly, the turbulence began to subside. In the medical bay, Dana's vital signs stabilized. Dr. Zellvorn's eyes widened as he studied the latest scans. "Remarkable," he breathed. "The fetus. It's adapting. I'm seeing physiological traits from both species, but also something entirely new." As the ship emerged from the ion storm, the immediate crisis passed. But Dana's pregnancy continued to advance at its accelerated pace, and supplies were running low. When long-range scanners detected a habitable planet nearby, the decision to land was unanimous. "There are energy signatures on the surface," Zara Kesh reported, her iridescent skin pulsing with excitement. "Advanced technology and traces of multiple species." The ship entered the planet's atmosphere, touching down on the outskirts of what appeared to be an abandoned city. Brian helped Dana into an environmental suit, her swollen abdomen making the task challenging. "I need to go with the landing party," he told her, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to find a safe place for you, for the baby." Dana's tendrils caressed his face. "Be careful," she whispered. The landing party, Brian, Dr. Corazin, Jack Harper, Major Zix, and Vex Nar, made their way into the alien ruins. Towering structures of an unknown iridescent material stretched towards the sky. As they ventured deeper into the city, holographic displays flickered to life around them. "It's some kind of historical record," Dr. Corazin said, her cybernetic implants interfacing with the alien technology. "This civilization, they mastered interspecies breeding millennia ago. Before they could process this revelation, a shimmering energy field materialized before them. From it emerged a group of beings unlike any they had encountered. Tall, ethereal creatures with bodies that seemed to shift between solid and translucent forms. "We are the Guardians," one of the beings announced, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "We have awaited the arrival of the true hybrid child for countless cycles. The prophecy is fulfilled." Brian stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "What prophecy? What do you know about our child?" The Guardian's form rippled, and an image appeared in the air between them. A vision of a being that combined human, Benzite, and something entirely new. "The one who will bridge the divide between all species," the Guardian intoned. "The catalyst for a new era of galactic harmony, or the spark that will ignite an interstellar war." Before Brian could respond, his communicator crackled to life. Zara Kesh's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Dana's gone into labor. The baby is coming now." The Guardians turned as one, their eyes fixed on Brian. "We can help," they said in unison. "Our medical facilities are far beyond anything you possess. But you must decide quickly. Do you trust us with the fate of your child?" Brian looked at his companions, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their eyes. The future of not just his family, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung on their next decision. As Dana's cries echoed through the communicator, Brian knew they were out of time. "Take us to her," he said to the Guardians, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Now! Take us to her," Brian said to the Guardians, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The ethereal beings nodded in unison, their forms shimmering as they led the way through the ancient city. Brian's heart raced as they moved swiftly through corridors that seemed to materialize before them, the iridescent walls pulsing with an otherworldly energy. They reached a chamber unlike anything Brian had ever seen. The room was alive with soft, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. In the center, Dana lay on a floating platform, her body racked with contractions. "Dana!" Brian called out, rushing to her side. Her tendrils reached for him, intertwining with his fingers as he grasped her hand. "Brian!" she gasped, her skin rippling with bioluminescent patterns. "The baby! It's coming!" Dr. Corazin and Dr. Zellvorn were already at work, their hands moving deftly over holographic displays that sprang to life around Dana. The Guardian medical team joined them, their ethereal forms weaving between the solid figures of the other doctors. "Her vitals are fluctuating wildly," Dr. Corazin reported, her cybernetic implants pulsing rapidly. The fetus is shifting between human and benzite physiologies at an unprecedented rate. Brian watched in awe as the medical chamber came to life around them. Streams of data flowed across transparent screens, depicting the intricate dance of DNA strands, merging and separating in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. Outside the medical facility, Jack Harper and Major Zix set up a defensive perimeter. The two men, once bitter enemies, now worked in tense but effective silence, their shared goal of protecting the new family overriding their past conflicts. "I've got movement on the eastern approach," Harper muttered, his hand hovering over his weapon. Major Zix's environment suit whirred as he turned to scan the area. "Negative. Just residual energy fluctuations from the city's systems." Inside, Dana's cries echoed through the chamber as her labor intensified. Brian held her hand tightly, murmuring words of encouragement as the medical team worked feverishly around them. "The child is adapting to the birth process," one of the guardians announced, its voice resonating in their minds. "It's quite extraordinary." Suddenly, the entire city seemed to come alive. Holographic displays flickered into existence throughout the medical chamber and beyond, showing cascading streams of data and vivid images of intertwining DNA strands. "The city is responding to the birth," another guardian explained. "It recognizes this as a moment of great significance." With a final guttural cry from Dana, the child entered the world. The chamber fell silent for a moment, then filled with the strong, clear cries of a newborn. "It's a girl," Dr. Zellvorn announced, his voice filled with wonder. Brian stared in amazement as the Guardian medical team gently cleaned and wrapped the infant. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, shifting between human and benzite tones. When she opened her eyes, Brian gasped. They were a striking blend of human and benzite features, with an otherworldly luminescence that seemed to look right through him. As Brian cradled his daughter for the first time, the medical sensors around them began to ping urgently. Dr. Corazin's eyes widened as she studied the readings. "The child, she's emitting some kind of energy field," she reported, her voice hushed with awe. "It's interacting with the city's technology." The Guardians gathered around, their forms pulsing with excitement. "This energy signature matches our ancestral prophecies," one of them intoned. "Your daughter may be the key to unlocking the full potential of our technology." As if in response to these words, the city around them hummed to life. Hidden chambers revealed themselves, filled with artifacts and technology that defied comprehension. The ship in orbit reported multiple incoming vessels, drawn by the surge of energy from the planet's surface. Vexnar, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. "We must act quickly," he said, his resonant voice cutting through the chaos. "I propose we form a temporary council, with representatives from each faction. We need to establish protocols for studying the child in this city without risking interstellar conflict." The Guardians nodded in agreement. "We will host this council," they said. "It is our duty as custodians of our ancestors' legacy." Brian looked down at his daughter, then at Dana, who smiled weakly from the medical platform. "We'll call her Nova," Dana said softly, "for the new era she represents." Brian nodded, feeling the weight of the galaxy settling on his shoulders. As representatives from various factions began to arrive, he knew that protecting Nova and navigating the complex political landscape ahead would be the greatest challenge of his life. Dr. Corazin and Dr. Zellvorn began their preliminary examinations of Nova, their expressions a mix of excitement and concern. "Her ability to adapt to different environments is unlike anything we've ever seen," Dr. Zellvorn reported. "She may be able to survive in conditions that would be lethal to either humans or benzites." Outside the medical facility, Jack Harper received a coded transmission. His face grew grim as he decoded the message. "Captain Chen reports a human fleet is en route," he said to Major Zix. "We've got company coming." The benzite officer nodded, his own communication device chirping. "Admiral Krell sends word that benzite forces approach as well," he replied, his voice tense. "The situation grows more complex by the moment." As the council prepared to convene and ships from various factions took up positions around the planet, Brian held Nova close, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger. He exchanged a look with Dana, both of them understanding the monumental task that lay before them. The ancient city hummed with awakening power, Nova's unique energy signature intertwining with its systems in ways no one yet understood. As tensions rose and the true potential of their daughter began to manifest, Brian and Dana knew that the decisions they made in the coming days would shape not only Nova's future, but potentially the fate of the entire galaxy. Galaxy. As the ancient city pulsed with renewed energy, Nova's cries suddenly shifted in pitch. Brian and Dana exchanged worried glances as their daughter's skin began to shimmer more intensely, the iridescent glow spreading across her tiny body. "Something's happening," Dana said, her tendrils curling anxiously around Nova. Dr. Corazin rushed to the infant's side, her cybernetic implants whirring as she scanned the child. "The energy field around Nova is intensifying," she reported, her voice tight with concern. "It's interacting with the city's systems on a level we've never seen before." As if on cue, the chamber around them hummed to life. Holographic displays flickered and danced, showing cascading data streams and intricate schematics of the city's layout. Dormant consoles lit up, their surfaces rippling with alien script. Vexnar strode into the room, his multifaceted eyes taking in the scene. "We need to convene the council immediately," he announced. "The human and Benzite fleets are approaching. We must act quickly to prevent a confrontation." Brian reluctantly tore himself away from Dana and Nova. "I'll join you," he said, turning to Dr. Zelvorn. "Keep them safe." The Benzite doctor nodded solemnly. "With my life," he promised. As Brian followed Vexnar to the council chamber, he caught sight of Jack Harper and Major Zix huddled over a communication terminal. The two men, once bitter enemies, now worked side by side with dogged commitment. "Any luck contacting the fleets?" Brian asked. Harper shook his head. "Not yet, but we're working on it. If we can just get through to Captain Chen and Admiral Krell, maybe we can talk some sense into them." The council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from each faction gathered. Vexnar took his place at the head of the table, his resonant voice cutting through the chatter. "We face a crisis unlike any in our history," he began. "Our actions here will determine the fate of not just our own species, but potentially the entire galaxy." As the council debated strategy, a tremor ran through the city. The walls pulsed with energy, and a low hum filled the air. Brian's communicator crackled to life. "Brian!" Dana's voice was urgent. "You need to get back here. Nova, she's changing." He raced back to the medical chamber, his heart pounding. When he arrived, he froze in shock. Nova, who had been a newborn just hours ago, now appeared to be several months old. Her eyes, wide and alert, fixed on him with an unsettling intelligence. Dr. Corazin's face was pale as she studied her readings. "Her growth rate is off the charts," she explained. "And there's more. We've detected traces of Guardian genetic material in her DNA." Before Brian could process this information, alarms blared throughout the city. Outside, a massive energy shield sprang to life, enveloping the entire settlement in a shimmering dome. "The city's defenses have activated," Dr. Selvorn reported, his fingers flying over a control panel. "All communications with the outside have been cut off." In the distance, they could see the faint outlines of the human and Benzite fleets through the translucent shield, locked in a tense standoff. Nova stirred in Dana's arms, her tiny hand reaching out towards a nearby console. As her fingers brushed the surface, the entire room lit up with holographic displays. A star map of the galaxy materialized above them, with several points pulsing with the same energy signature as the ancient city. "Incredible," Dr. Corazin breathed. "She's accessing the city's database." Over the next few hours, Nova's growth continued to accelerate at an alarming rate. By nightfall, she resembled a young child, her eyes bright with knowledge beyond her years. "Mom, Dad," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I know what I have to do." Brian and Dana exchanged stunned looks as their daughter, now appearing to be about 5 years old, approached them with purpose. "The Guardian's prophecy," Nova continued. "I've seen it all in the city's records. There are other outposts like this one, scattered across the galaxy. To bring balance, to fulfill my destiny, I need to activate them." As Nova spoke, the energy shield fluctuated, creating brief windows of communication. Jack Harper and Major Zix seized the opportunity, sending urgent messages to their respective fleets, pleading for restraint and explaining the extraordinary situation on the surface. Brian looked at his daughter, this child who had aged years in a matter of hours, who held the key to technologies beyond their comprehension. He saw the weight of destiny in her eyes, and his heart ached with a mixture of pride and fear. An interstellar journey, Dana murmured, her tendrils curling protectively around Nova. But how? And what dangers will we face? Nova's gaze swept across the room, taking in the assembled group of humans, Benzites, and Guardians. Together, she said simply, we'll face it together. As the energy shield continued to fluctuate and the fleets maintained their uneasy standoff in orbit, Brian realized that their adventure was a long way to go. In fact, it was just beginning. Beginning. Nova's eyes met Brian's, a silent understanding passing between them. The child-turned preteen stepped forward, her movements fluid and purposeful. "Dad, it's time," she said, her voice carrying a weight beyond her years. "I need to activate the network." Brian nodded, his heart racing as he watched his daughter approach a control panel that had materialized from the city's living walls. As Nova's hands made contact with its surface, the energy shield surrounding them began to pulsate rhythmically. The chamber filled with a low hum, growing in intensity as Nova's connection with the ancient technology deepened. Suddenly, the shield expanded at an astonishing rate, engulfing not just the city, but the entire planet in seconds. Dr. Corazin's eyes widened as she monitored the readings on her instruments. "The shield is reaching orbit," she reported, her voice tinged with awe. It's neutralizing the weapon systems on both fleets." Outside, the human and Benzite ships found themselves encased in a translucent bubble of energy. Panic spread through their crews as systems shut down, only to be replaced by relief as they realized life support and communications remained functional. Nova's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as her consciousness expanded, touching the minds of every sentient being within reach. Above the city, a massive holographic representation of the galaxy flickered into existence, eliciting gasps from the assembled council members. "These are the dormant outposts," Nova explained, her voice echoing with newfound power as she highlighted several points across the galactic map. "They were created to bring species together, to foster understanding and cooperation, and I'm the key to unlocking them." Donna moved closer to Brian, her tendrils curling around his arm. "Our daughter," she whispered, her voice a mixture of pride and trepidation. Nova turned to her parents, her eyes softening as she regarded them. "Mom, Dad, this is my destiny. Thank you for giving me life, for making me who I am. Your love, your union, it's what makes me capable of this." She embraced them both, and for a moment they were just a family, holding each other close. But the moment passed, and Nova stepped back, her expression resolute. With a nod to the council and the holographic representations of the fleet commanders that had appeared around them, Nova placed her hands back on the control panel. The city shuddered, sections beginning to shift and reconfigure. "We're going to need transportation," Nova announced as the transformation continued. "This city, it's not just a city, it's a ship, the Harmony, and it will carry us to the other outposts." As the Harmony took shape around them, the Guardians stepped forward, their forms pulsing with excitement. "We will accompany you," one intoned. "It is our duty and our honor to serve as advisors on this journey." Dr. Corazin and Dr. Xelvorn exchanged glances before addressing Nova. "We'd like to join as well," Dr. Xelvorn said. "The opportunity to study these outposts, it's unprecedented." Vex Nar, his multifaceted eyes gleaming, added his voice to the chorus. "As a diplomat, I offer my services. This mission will require careful negotiation and understanding." Nova nodded, accepting their offers with grace. She then turned her attention to the fleet commanders. With a gesture, she brought Captain Sarah Chen and Admiral Krell to the surface, their forms materializing in the council chamber. "Captain, Admiral," Nova greeted them, her voice carrying an authority that belied her youthful appearance. "I understand your concerns, but I ask you to see the potential here. Join us. Let your people be part of this grand journey." For hours, Nova mediated between the two leaders, her words bridging gaps that had seemed insurmountable. By the time the sun began to set, both Chen and Krell had agreed to send representatives on the expedition. As the council chamber buzzed with activity, Jack Harper and Major Zix approached Brian and Dana. The two men stood side by side, their previous animosity replaced by a shared purpose. "We've been talking," Harper began, glancing at his Benzite counterpart. Major Zix nodded. "We'd like to offer our services as heads of security for the Harmony. Your daughter's safety will be our top priority." Brian looked at the unlikely pair, a smile tugging at his lips. "We'd be honored to have you both," he said, extending his hand. As the day of launch approached, the Harmony hummed with activity. Crews from both fleets worked alongside the city's systems, preparing for their unprecedented journey. Nova spent long hours interfacing with the ship's controls, her mind expanding to encompass its vast systems. Finally, the moment arrived. Nova stood at the helm, Brian and Dana flanking her. With a thought, she activated the Harmony's propulsion systems. The massive ship rose from the planet's surface, majestic and awe-inspiring. As they broke atmosphere, Nova interfaced with one final system within the ancient city they were leaving behind. A beacon sprang to life, broadcasting across the galaxy. It carried with it the story of Nova's birth, of the union between human and Benzite, and an invitation to join their mission of peace and discovery. The Harmony's faster-than-light engines engaged, and the stars around them blurred. As they accelerated towards their first destination, Nova turned to address the assembled crew. "This is just the beginning," she said, her smile bridging her dual heritage. "Together, we'll forge a future where our differences are celebrated, not feared. A future where love, like that between my parents, can flourish across the stars." As the Harmony streaked across the cosmos, Brian and Dana exchanged a glance. Their unexpected meeting had led to this moment, to a child who held the key to galactic cooperation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family, as part of this extraordinary crew. The ship accelerated further, carrying with it the hopes of multiple civilizations. As they vanished into the cosmic tapestry, the legend of the human Benzite hybrid and her extraordinary family began to spread across the stars, a beacon of hope in a vast and varied galaxy.
If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.